All right. Welcome to the 1:30 review. We'll go from noon to 1, and I'll pick up where I left off. If you were not here on Tuesday, I uploaded the review that I did onto YouTube, so it's already there live. People have watched it. And then you'll see the questions that are listed here and them being updated. I mentioned that the 24 spring version of this, it's basically, I just took the original, I think it was 16 spring 130 practice test and key, and then I use that information to just create a new blank one, and then I've changed it so the key on this one is not correct. I've changed a lot of the numbers, and so you might have to double check some of the things. So the biggest thing that's new for 130 this semester is going to be the introduction of flow rate questions. And then I went through those, a couple of examples, when we got together on Tuesday. And basically all you're doing is you got to remember to take your volume. Usually it's going to give it to you as 600 milliliters, 500 milliliters, 250 milliliters, whatever happens to give it to you as, and then you put it over your time, and then you just reduce that number. So like in this example, it was 600 over 2 hours. So as a kind of practice, those of you that are here, if I put in, let's say I did, say 250 ml of Ringer's lactate over 2 hours, what would you put as your flow rate for this question? And then you could just, if you can, put it into the chat, just what you would set your infusion pump to for, if they were to receive 250 milliliters Ringer's lactate over 2 hours. Perfect. Yeah. So you got that 125 mil per hour. Not too bad. And then I'll just make sure the answer key is here. So if you reference this later, you'll have the key. All right, let's try one that involves doing a drop factor type question. So I'm going to use the wording here, but I'm going to change the drop factor. So so let's just say the tubing package is labeled as, let's just say 10 per ml. You order to administer at a rate of, let's just say, let's say 200 milliliters in, let's just say 2 hours. All right, so go ahead and try that one. This one might be a little bit more challenging, but I want to see what you get. If you're just jumping in, I'm just having students just kind of work through this problem, and then just once you have an answer, just put it into the chat. Yeah, so I'll tell you, Maggie, yes, you got it correct. You rounded because it was some weird 16.6 repeating. And with drops, you have to round to the nearest whole number. You cannot give somebody a partial drop. Okay. So if you ever get stuck on a question like this, it's good to just kind of write it out. Remember, we always start with our flow rate. So what was it? 200 milliliters in 2 hours. But since we're looking for drops per minute, I'm going to encourage you to convert that 2 hours. Just convert it right into minutes, like right away. Okay. So 200 milliliters, 120 minutes. And then you're just going to multiply by the drop factor, which is 10. $200 times 10 divided by 120. And that's where you get the 16.6 repeating. And you're going to round that to the nearest whole drop, because you can't give somebody a partial drop. You can't give them a half a drop. You can't give them a quarter of a drop. It's either a drop, 1 drop, or 2 drops. Like there's no in between. Nope. Trust me. Rounding is, I would say, the standard concern, which is why I try and give you some random numbers. Now, I think on the actual test, you'll have something that ends in a solid answer, so you won't have to worry about that too much, but it is good practice. So as a reminder, especially since this is your second semester taking this test, you have some rounding rules. They're clearly spelled out for you in the blueprint. But when we talk about rounding, these are the rounding rules that you're following. So in reality, it's just if it's a number greater than 1, round to the nearest 10th. If it's a number less than 1, round to the nearest 100th. Okay. So that's kind of like the standard, with the following exceptions. If you're doing a metric to metric conversion, I'm going from milligrams to grams, I'm going from micrograms to milligrams. When you're just doing that basic unit to unit conversion, you do not round those answers. So like as an example, down here, like where we have this as our answer. So we converted 37 milligrams to grams. My answer is 0.037 grams. I do not reduce that. I don't make that 0.04. I leave it alone because it's just a metric to metric conversion. Okay. Now, if I'm going between units, so let's say I'm going from like here, milliliters to ounces or teaspoons to milliliters, then you would round to the nearest 10th, depending on if you needed to. Okay. So like for this example, number 3, I wrote it out. 173 milliliters divided by 30 gives us 5.766666666. We're going to round that final answer to 5.8 ounces because that's what you're supposed to do. Okay. Same thing with this teaspoon one. You're going to round it to the nearest 10th because that's what your rounding rules tell you to do. But like here, where I had 1,052 micrograms and my answer was 1.052, I'm not going to round that to 1.1. Okay. You will get that wrong if you round it, because you're not supposed to round in that situation. And you are supposed to know that you're not supposed to round in that situation. Okay. I'm not making those rules. I'm just telling you that's what it is. All right. And then when you go from pounds to kilograms, that's probably the most common time that you're going to do a where you're going to be rounding to the nearest tenth, because you're going to get some long number and they don't want you writing some long series of numbers. They want you to know that you're supposed to round to the nearest tenth. Okay. And then if you're dealing with capsules, like you're administering capsules and for some reason you get like, 2.7 capsules is what you're supposed to administer, you would round to the nearest whole capsule. So in that instance, you're probably going to give them 3 capsules. However, the question should be written in such a way that that shouldn't be a problem. And then now, with drops, you can't give someone a partial drop, just like you can't give someone a partial capsule. You might be saying like, oh, I've seen my mom or my grandfather give themselves a partial capsule. And I was like, well, they're most likely are doing that against the doctor's orders. So you might want to talk with them about that, or at least make sure their doctor knows what they're doing, because they're not getting 50% of the medication. All right. So, yep, you're welcome. What questions do you have? What question types do you have? You can unmute and ask. You can just type it into the chat. You want to see a, insert type of question. Just let me know and we'll review them. All right, let's look at question 22. Okay. So my hope is that at some point we'll get rid of these reconstitution questions, and I'll show you what a real reconstitution question looks like, but this is most likely what you'll see on the test. Really what this is can you look at and rule in, rule out what information you need to use and not use. So before I do 22, let me just show you 21, because 21 is very straightforward. Okay. So it says an order requires 60 milligrams of a drug. The vial has the following 3 choices of strength after reconstitution: 5 milligrams per milliliter, 10 milligrams per milliliter, 20 milligrams per milliliter. And it says, what would the volume, what would you administer to the patient in ml for the strongest concentration? So the first thing you need to know is, how do you calculate the strongest concentration? Well, strongest concentration is the one that's going to have the more substance per volume. So the way I would say it is like this. Let's say you order, you're at your favorite restaurant and you decide, hey, I'm going to get the margarita. Then you can say, do you want a virgin margarita? Do you want a regular margarita? Or do you want to make it a double? Okay. Which one has more alcohol in it? And it's going to be the one that's double, right? It has a double shot in it, basically. Okay. I don't even know if that's how that drink would even be ordered if you wanted it stronger. Okay. But virgin means nothing. There's no alcohol in it. It's just you like a margarita flavored, juice drink. Okay. Then you want regular alcohol, or you want you want to leave feeling a little tipsy. Okay. So you choose the one that has the most in it. So for this question, the strongest concentration is 20. And then you can use ordered over available if you want. So 60 over 20 times your quantity. And then you would administer 3 ml. Okay. So I'm showing you that because that's like an easy version of what this looks like. And I'm going to show you an alternative version in just a moment. But let's look at this next question, Pfizer pen. So the Pfizer pen question says that we have 750,000 units IM stat every 6 hours. And then you want to use the following information to choose the strongest concentration. So you want to pay attention, strongest concentration. How many milliliters will you administer to the patient? So on some of these labels, you're going to see extraneous information. It's going to tell you how much water the pharmacy added to the solution to get to the units per milliliter solution. So that's why this is all crossed out, because you don't care about this. That just tells you how much water was added to get to what you do care about, which is the units per milliliter solution. So just like question 21, it says to choose the strongest concentration. Which one is the strongest? Is it the 250,000 units per ml, 500,000 units per ml, or 1 million units per ml? And so this would be the strongest concentration. Okay. Where a lot of students get hung up is that milliliters of diluent added. Why is it even written there? It's the same reason that I would tell you I'm administering 45 milligrams of gentamicin over 150 milliliters in 45 minutes every 6 hours with a drop factor of 10. And I'm asking you to calculate drop rate. It really doesn't matter that you do it every 6 hours. And it doesn't matter that it is gentamicin at a strength of 45 milligrams. What does matter is the flow rate, the 150 milligram, or the 150 milliliters every 35 minutes or 45 minutes, whatever I said, that the volume and the time times the drop factor, that's the only thing that matters. Same thing here. I have ordered, my order is units, 750,000 units. And then I have written clearly that it's units per ml solution. And so that's what tells you what to use. Then you just take your 750,000 units over your 1 million units. Times your quantity. Oops, sorry. Which will give you an answer of 0.75 milliliters. Now, there's a chance that the key is wrong on that, because sometimes if I went through and I changed these questions, I may have forgotten to change the key. But that's why I'm redoing some of these questions with you. And then you can see that it's written there. The answer tells you that it's 0.75. That is your answer. You don't round that to 0.8. The reason you don't round that to 0.8 is because this number is less than 1, and numbers less than 1 get rounded to the nearest 100th place. So you need two numbers after the decimal. Let me show you what this will look like. Probably, I don't know if it'll be next semester, but at some point you'll see these questions asked a little bit differently. And I want you to see like what it looks like. Just give me 1 second. All right. So this is actually how they do their questions at Boyce. When they ask them, and they get these questions right there, right from the get-go, in 110. You did too. It's just that you didn't get it the same style of question. But I'm going to show you what this looks like from a standpoint of a reconstitution, just in case you do see this at some point in time. You're not going to see it right now, but you might see it at some point in time in the future. Okay, so I'll leave this on here so you can see this. And I'll even write a note just so that people can see this as like possible future question. But I don't think they're adding it yet to your test, so don't freak out just yet. So basically what they're going to tell you is you have Kefsol 800 milligrams, IM Q6 available, and then it gives you your label, and then it's going to say, you know, how many ml per dose. So how much would you administer? Okay. Now, when you look at this, the thing that's going to be a little bit confusing is it's going to tell you something like, it's going to say Kefsol, and then it's going to say something like it's listed here, and it's just going to have 1 gram listed. I'm looking for milliliters. I'm missing some information here, right? I don't know where to look for, or I don't know what the 1 gram is at per 5 ml, per 10 ml, per 100 ml. What is that? Because I don't know. So in a question like this, you might have to actually look at the label and actually pull out the information or tease out the information and find out what it says. So here it tells you to add 2.5 milliliters of sterile water. So remember I told you in the previous question, it says how much milliliters of diluent added, right? So that's where that comes from. This is just a sample version of how that might be written or listed, but this is how it would actually look on a label. But guess what? I don't need that information. That's not what I'm looking for. It just tells me how much the pharmacy needs to add to it, or if you were the one adding water to this, that's how much you would add. Then it tells you, it gives you an approximate volume of 3 milliliters, and then it gives us this really important piece of information here in the parentheses, and it tells us that the strength after adding the 2.5 milliliters of water would be 330 milligrams per milliliter. So I'm going to take my order, divide it by my available, times my quantity. And that's how you would solve this type of question. But like I said, Allegheny campus is not asking this question yet, but you might see it in 220, 230, 240. I think it's going to creep in, mainly because I think it's a better question to ask than this one, because I know this is a common question that gets asked, and I always sit there and I go, I hate that I wrote this question up, because students hate it so much. It's poorly put together. But I want to show you real quick where that came from. This, and then you're going to say like, oh, okay, I see why this was done this way. All right. So this is where this, where'd that go? Shoot. Okay. Well, it's one version of it. There we go. So this is where this came from. Pfizer pen, 1 gram. So it tells us 1 million units. I'm going to rotate this so you can, I'm going to try to rotate it. See if it'll let me. No, I guess it won't. But if I zoom in here, I thought I could rotate it, but it's not going to let me. If I look over here, it'll tell you milliliters diluent added, 20 milliliters, 10 milliliters, 4 milliliters, 1.8 milliliters. And then it tells you units per milliliter solution, 50,000, 100,000, 250,000, 500. This is how this label looks. Okay. I'm just telling you, I didn't make this up when I created this like off the cuff. I just based it off of what this label looked like. And then I tried to simplify it. Although I made it obviously difficult for students, because then they're like, what in the world do I do with this information? But now you know where it's coming from. Okay. So when you see that question, and I'm hoping that they're slowly getting rid of that question. But you'll see, if you see that question, just remember to choose the strongest concentration, ignore the milliliters to diluent added, and you should be good to go. So no, to be clear, you will see most likely will see a question 22 because you probably saw it on your 110 test too, or at least something similar. The trick to this question is just to make sure you ignore the milliliters diluent added. So you may see a question that looks like this. Unfortunately, I'm saying that later in the future they should look more like this, but right now, yeah, you might see this. Yeah, and then the biggest thing is all you're going to do is change this number because this will be the same. This is going to be ignored. So the only thing that really changes is how many units are ordered. So at least you know that. All right. Any other questions for like as you've looked over the 130 tests? Any other questions or question types? I do not have any other practice tests for 130 other than what's listed on the OneDrive folder.
Okay, thank you. So it's just this one practice test that you are showing right now, right? In the OneDrive folder?
Hold on, let me look.
Okay.
There might be actually quite a few.
Okay.
Let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but
Okay, then I'm not looking.
most of them are very similar. Like I just changed the date. I may have tweaked the number because that's what these are mirrors of the actual test or similar to the actual test. It has changed since the original ones of these were written in 2016. So they have changed, but the practice test questions, and then there's some additional practice questions that are good to look at, and you can see some differences there. And then if it were me and I was going through this and I wanted to create my own study guide, one of the things I would encourage you to do is go to your blueprint. And I also I posted the blueprint on Blackboard or on not Blackboard, OneDrive, but go to the blueprint folder and basically just kind of look for, and I've given plenty of examples of these types of questions, but look for examples of these types of questions. And then just create, like, can you add 2 questions that would qualify as household measurements, 2 questions that would qualify as metric unit conversions, a question or 2 that would indicate intake output, meaning like the fluid replacement volume question. And then on down, because this is the template that they're using when they set up the questions. And then that's kind of the template I tried to follow when I created these practice tests. But again, they're over 8 years old. So that also kind of plays a part in the fact that, they're going to be outdated to some extent. You've already practiced them a lot. I always say if all you have is the one practice test, the best thing you can do is to just practice that you're doing your setups consistently correct, because the only thing that's really going to change on the test is, the drug, which means that you might get a different, like instead of 20 milligrams per 5 ml, it might be 10 milligrams per 2 ml. You're going to see different, numbers, but the process is still the same.
And how do I access that OneDrive? Because I did not see it in Blackboard, so maybe I'm looking in the wrong spot.
So they're in the so you should have received a thing that kind of looked like this. It may have been an email. So wherever you got the Zoom link from, right here where it says click here for practice tests, click here for my YouTube channel. That's what you would do. You just click that and that would open up the OneDrive folder. If you don't have that, just email me and I'll email it to you.
Yeah, so I did click that. And however that I have this page saved, I think, in my computer, it doesn't work. So the link doesn't work to click for more practice tests. But yeah, I can give you my email if you don't mind.
Well, I'll have you email me. So I'll put it
Yeah.
here and then you can I'll reply back to it and I'll give you the link. So the link
Thank you so
hasn't
much.
changed. It should work. The only thing is if you try and open it in I don't know how it works. Like I've only ever done it on like my computer. Um so I don't know how it would open like if you have an iPhone or an iPad or things like that. I don't know how that
Right.
works. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So for rounding, um, so we'll just use the pounds to kilograms as an example. So when you get your answer, so if it's 172 pounds, divide by 2.2, I'm going to get this answer, 78.181818 repeating, round to the nearest tenth. So, and then what we did here is we went from household to metric. So pounds to kilograms is household to metric. If I go from metric, milliliters, to household, I'm going to follow that same rule that if I get an answer that has this, looks, yeah, your answer for this becomes 5.76 repeating. And so you're just going to round it to the nearest tenth. And then for the metric system, if I'm going from metric to metric, you do not round metric to metric conversions. Don't round those. So if your answer is 1.052525252, which it won't be, but if it was, that's your answer. Don't round it. It's only going to be however many figures or numbers are listed in the original question. So you want to include all those numbers. So if there's a 3 and a 7 in the milligrams, there should be a 3 and a 7 in the grams or the micrograms or whatever you're converting it to. Yep, you're welcome. Yeah, I know at some of the other sometimes students get told or they get told like, oh yeah, you don't round or you round to the nearest whole. But if we're following the blueprint clearly states numbers greater than 1 round to the nearest tenth, numbers less than 1 round to the nearest hundredth. Even though it specifically says for milliliters, that would also apply for any other rounding because there's no other rules stating rounding wise. Otherwise, we would, do something different. And then I can't remember if I said this already today, but I said it in another review session. Like if I was like, let's say I was making something and I was preparing a recipe and it said to add like 173 milliliters and it came out to 5.8 ounces. That's like I had to do conversion because the only way I knew how to measure something was in ounces. When I'm doing this, I'm going to pour 6 ounces. Okay. I'm going to make it very easy on myself. And that's probably what you would do in a situation where you're actually administering something like this, where they would be very, very clear and transparent as far as how many ounces you're actually going to do. But in the CCAC math bubble, we round numbers to the nearest tenth, especially ones that have long continuation of numbers. Good question. Okay, good. Yeah, so oral meds. So The difference between oral and parenteral medications are how it's delivered. But as far as calculating or doing the math, it's the same. So let's do an example of this. Let's make this, and we'll make it easy. So we'll make this, we'll just do, let's see. We'll say 375. Where'd that go? 375 milligrams. Oops. That is not what I meant to do. Let's make that 750. Meant to change this to 375. All right. So this says if you ordered 375 milligrams, how many teaspoons would you administer? So you got to pay attention to make sure if it asks for teaspoons, give it teaspoons. If it asks for milliliters, then you give milliliters. And you're just going to do ordered over half or ordered over available, right? My order, 375. My available, 125. And then my quantity. So this is where I'm going to show you something that I think is like a shortcut. Instead of writing my available as 5 ml, what does 5 ml equal? 5 ml equals 1 teaspoon. So I'm going to multiply that by 1 teaspoon. And then I'm going to get 3 teaspoons. What if you got an answer of 3.5 teaspoons? Can you give somebody a half a teaspoon? Yes. The next time you are in your kitchen, look in the drawer where you keep your measuring spoons, and I bet you have half teaspoon and quarter teaspoon. You probably have, you may even have a half tablespoon measurement, because why not have all those different things? Another oral-based medication might be like a tablet, right? So this, it says 2.5 milligrams. You're going to give them a half a tablet. Remember, if this is a written test, a lot of times they want you to write this like this. They want you to write it as a half a tablet. So 1/2. If it's me, I'm probably writing 0.5 or 1/2 just to make sure that they know that I know the right answer. If you ever run into that situation.
What about if it's a computer test? Would you just leave it in decimal?
You would just do what they tell you to do, because they'll usually tell you in the instructions, if it's a computer test, to just everything should be answered as a decimal.
Okay, so before the test gets started, the instructions.
It should, yes. I mean, I don't know that definitively, but my guess is that they would go back through and review what you missed and then say like, oh, okay, you wrote 1/2, which is the correct answer. So there is that possibility. But I don't know, because I'm not the one who writes your test, but I'm pretty sure like they have to tell you like, are you supposed to include your units in your answer? If so, do you put a space after it? And then, or do you just put the numerical answer? So and then for fractions, they want you just to put everything as a decimal answer. They should tell you that. And I think that's a fair question to ask before the test starts.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Then this one as an oral medication, 750 divided by 250. So you're just administering 3 capsules. All right, let's look at some of the parenteral medications. These are all oral. This is a parenteral. What's parenteral? Parenteral just means that it's done other ways other than oral, right? So it's subcutaneous or it's intramuscular. Technically, it could be IV as well. So let's say instead of 75 milligrams, you're supposed to give, let's just make this kind of weird and say, it shouldn't be that weird. Let's just say 80 milligrams. This should still work. All right. So 80 milligrams Demerol, intramuscular. It's in a pre-filled syringe. And so what they're asking you to do is calculate the milliliters and then to mark the 2x. And the 2x is this thing that you're just going to put an arrow next to the mark, and you just need to know what each of these little tick marks indicate. So step 1 is we want to take the order divided by the available times the quantity. And then we're going to get, so 80 divided by 50. It's going to give me 1.6 ml. Okay, so 1.6. And then I want to make sure I mark that on the syringe. So what I'm looking for is, are these tick marks in 0.1 increments? So if it is, then it should add up. So this would be 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5. So then I would put a mark here at 1.6. Sometimes I'll ask you to shade it. So you can shade it as well. Okay, so it just depends on how they want you to mark it. Or here it even said to circle the correct amount. So it might even be more accurate if you're circling it. And then you would do the same thing for down here. So here, let me change this up. Let me make this, let me just change the number here for this as well. Let's say it's, let's see here. Yeah, let's do, give me 1 second. Yeah, let's just do 6,000. So what would you put as your, or what would you, which milliliter would you mark on your tube X? Yep, and you guys, you're getting it. So yeah, 0.6 would be your answer, and then your mark would be right here, or circle, I guess. Perfect. Okay, good questions. All right, we have about 10 minutes left. If you have any other questions, if you don't have any other questions or something comes up later, you can email me. I put it in the chat. So you can email me if you have any other questions that kind of arise. And then like I said, just give me some time to go over it. Yeah, so number 20, may have already done this one. Yeah, so I changed the variables up here. Right. So number 20, we're going to set up just like we did the previous flow rate question. The only difference with this one is it was in hours already instead of it being in minutes. And so what I typically recommend for when you're working through a question like this, if it's in hours, you know you're going to convert it to minutes, just go ahead and convert hours to minutes right off the bat. So I showed the long way. Okay, so I took 1,000 milliliters per 6 hours times the drop factor of 10, and then I converted hours to minutes. So I divided by 60, and then I got a rounded answer of 28 drops per minute. Alternatively, and what I would recommend for you is, since you already know you're going to minutes, just go ahead and make that, instead of doing 6 hours, do 6 times 60, which is 360 minutes, and then multiply it by your drop factor. And as a reminder, if you get a question that is or a drop question that ends in a decimal, you cannot give a partial drop. So this is where you don't round to the nearest 10th or the nearest 100th. You round to the nearest whole number when it comes to drops. Yep, you're welcome. And then just so you know, Danielle, since you asked this question, I did go over this, so like you can watch me and going through it in the part 1 of the review. This will be labeled as part 2. But I just wanted to let you know that way you're not wondering like, hey, what are we supposed to be doing here?
You know what? I completely forgot because I watched that yesterday and I have the right answer on my paper, but I guess when I first started it, before I watched the video completely, I got it wrong. So I like to do the practice quiz before I watch the reviews. But
Good. And
never mind.
that's,
Thank you.
no, you're welcome. And that is the proper way to do it. I even tell students, pause like before I start explaining it, like, because I'll change the number, pause it, then answer it, see if you get the same answer I get.
Okay, thank you. I
You're welcome.
appreciate it.
Absolutely. Okay, so well, I'll first, so someone asked what a questions on time. So you probably won't see a question where you're dealing with time, like where you're trying to get an answer, like, you know, because technically, no, you wouldn't. If you want to be very precise, like let's say I got 30.5 hours, you would need to know that that's 30 hours, 30 minutes. Okay. But my guess is that you're not going to see a question like that. So you shouldn't have to worry about that. If you do, let me just see if I have an example. Let's see here. I don't remember there being one where I asked you about time. So I don't think you need to worry about that for 130. Like you might see something like this where you're calculating to a time, but it should be straightforward. So yeah, and whenever you're converting hours to minutes, you would just handle your rounding at the end of the problem. So like let's say you were doing a flow rate question and you got to like your answer was 45.456 milliliters per hour, then you would just round to the nearest 10th in that instance. So but if you are calculating like how many hours does this infuse at and you get like 3.6 hours, like I said, I don't think you're gonna get a question like that. It shouldn't be written that way. So I'll just say, don't worry about that. If you do get something like that, you just multiply the decimal by 60, and that'll tell you the minutes, if you are ever stuck. So that would be like 3 hours, 36 minutes for the 3.6 example. You're welcome. Yeah, I know. Sometimes you guys start asking me like what ifs, and I try and get you away from that, because those aren't the things that they're going to try and gotcha on. They're going to got you on, did you remember your conversion factors? Did you remember your rounding rules? Did you remember to mark your cup or your tube X or whatever they tell you to mark? Did you mark it correctly? Those are the things that they're going to focus on. It's not going to be some like random, only Dr. Rad could get this question right because he knows how to do dimensional analysis really, really well. Like I'm not the test subject, so I'm just letting you know that it shouldn't be like that. Of course, I can always be wrong, right? All right. All right, well, that'll be a good place. Sure. We'll do one more here. All right. So let's say it's we'll just do, I'll just say 0.5 liters, and it's infusing at 125 milliliters per hour. How long will that infusion take? So go ahead and try and solve that. And what would your answer be if I have a half liter infusing at 125 milliliters per hour? How long will it take to complete its infusion? All right. And since we're running a little short on time, so this would just be 4 hours. Because we have 500 milliliters infusing at 125 mil per hour. And that gives me 4 hours. All right, so keep practicing. Watch the Allegheny review reviews. Go back and rewatch if you haven't watched already the first review session, because I just dove right into flow rates, because that's the biggest thing that's different compared to what you saw in 110. I went over the Reconstitution type questions. You might see, like I said, that Pfizer pen type question. So just be prepared for it and just know you just eliminate and cross out that milliliters diluent added. That doesn't tell you. All you're looking for is what is the mil per solution. And then that's the information you need in order to solve your question, or your units per mil. Yeah, that's what I meant to say, not mil per solution, units per mil. So, and then if I don't hear from you, good luck, and have a great semester. And I'll probably see you in the fall for 220, 230. All right. Yep, you're welcome.